Hey everybody, welcome back to EMT training. It's Gabby Reed again, and today we're going to be talking about environmental emergencies and burns. An environmental emergency is an illness triggered when the body cannot maintain a constant temperature. This is due to inconsistent heat production, which is influenced by the body's core temperature, medical conditions, body fluid status, and ingestion of drugs and chemicals. Heat exhaustion is caused by prolonged exposure to or physical exertion in high temperatures. During this time, the body loses excessive amounts of water and salt due to sweating. Some signs and symptoms of heat exhaustion include moist, pale skin, excessive sweating, weakness, possible fainting, and nausea. Treatment for these patients includes loosening or removing any clothing, and having the patient drink water if they are not nauseated and able to drink without assistance. Heat stroke is also caused by prolonged exposure to or physical exertion in high temperatures and also involves losing excessive nutrients through water and salt due to excessive sweating. Heat stroke develops after heat exhaustion has occurred and is a much more serious condition. The sweating experienced during heat exhaustion will soon stop and the skin will become hot, flushed, and dry. The body temperature will then rise to about 103 degrees. These patients will also experience altered mental status or loss of consciousness, potential seizures, slurred speech, nausea, and a rapid, strong pulse. If your patient is experiencing heat stroke, it's important to cool them down as soon as possible. So, apply cold packs to the patient's neck, groin, and armpits. There are major arteries near these locations, so the blood can distribute the coolness from the ice packs throughout the body. Or also keep the patient's skin cool and wet by applying wet sponges or towels. This diagram just shows the difference between heat exhaustion and heat stroke. You can see that patients with heat exhaustion have cool, pale, clammy skin, and patients with heat stroke have red, hot, dry skin. It's also important to note the difference in pulse. In heat exhaustion, the patient will experience a rapid, weak pulse, and in heat stroke, the patient will experience a rapid, strong pulse. And lastly, and what we'll get into in the next slide, is the muscle cramps that go along with heat exhaustion. So we'll talk about heat cramps now. Heat cramps are a symptom of heat exhaustion, so they're caused by the same thing, prolonged exposure to or physical exertion in high temperatures, and that loss of nutrients due to excessive sweating. Some signs and symptoms include painful muscle spasms, fatigue, and heavy sweating. Since heat cramps are related to heat exhaustion, the treatment is very similar. You're going to cool down your patient with ice packs and water. If the patient can drink on their own, give them a sports drink that has electrolytes in it. The electrolytes contain nutrients that were lost through that excessive sweating. Also, have the patient lightly stretch or massage the affected area and do not resume activity until the cramps dissipate. So now that we've talked about heat emergencies, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about some cold emergencies. Hypothermia is caused by exposure to cold environments for extended periods of time. This can be really low air temperatures or really low water temperatures. Some signs and symptoms include shivering, low heart rate, exhaustion, altered mental status, a low body temp, usually below 95 degrees, and slow, shallow breathing. When you have a patient with hypothermia, it's important to keep them warm and dry and to handle them with care. To warm them up, you can wrap them in dry blankets and remove any wet clothing. Provide them with some warm, humidified oxygen. Place heat packs in the neck, armpit, and groin areas, or which is the same placement as the cold packs for the heat stroke patient from earlier. And also be sure to handle the patient carefully to prevent cardiac dysrhythmia. So over here we have a picture of frostbite, which is an example of a local cold injury. These occur when skin and underlying tissue become very cold or freeze in low temperature environments. Some signs and symptoms include firm, discolored skin, which can be red, white, and or black, like in this picture, and numbness or pain in the affected area. For the treatment, there are two main goals. First, you want to protect the area from friction, trauma, or pressure. This can be done by removing any clothing or jewelry. Don't break any blisters, and don't rub the injured area. The second goal is to rewarm the extremity and maintain a warm environment. This can be done by immersing the affected part in a warm water bath. To maintain that temperature, you can stir the bath and continue the immersion until the color and sensation have returned. Then wrap the area with a dry, sterile dressing. All right, last thing we're going to talk about, burns. So there's three main types. We've got first degree, second degree, and third degree burns. The first degree burn only burns this top layer of skin here, which is called the dermis. An example of this would be sunburn. Second degree burns burn the top two layers, so the dermis and the epidermis. Think of the dermis as older skin and the epidermis as newer skin. These burns are usually red, swollen, and painful, and they can have blisters. Third degree burns burn that old skin, the new skin layer, and the subcutaneous layer, which is a fatty layer underneath the skin. These types of burns damage the nerve endings, so the patient may not immediately feel pain, but eventually they will. The skin appears stiff, leathery, and white or tan. The treatment for all of these burns is pretty much the same. First, if the burn is still burning, you want to stop it. So remove any smoldering clothing or jewelry, or if it's a chemical burn, wash the chemicals off that are burning the patient. Then cover the burned area with a dry, sterile dressing. There is one case where you can use a moist, sterile dressing to augment the pain, and that's only if the burned area is less than 10% BSA. And we'll talk about on the next slide how to calculate BSA. So the rule of nines is used to estimate the body surface area, or BSA. There's a picture of the rule of nines found on the back of the PCR on the top right corner, I believe, and it looks like this. On the left of the picture, you have an adult, and on the right, you have an infant. Another good way to estimate it is by using your hand. The palm of your hand is about 1% body surface area. Over here, there's a table that goes into a little more detail on how to calculate BSA. It's just based off of this picture. And you can pause the video here if you want to go over it. And that's all we've got for today's training. So if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'll see you all later.